Let's talk about this then. We're talking about the Yolanda Saldivar conviction in the death of Selena. Just for some background here, what was your original role in that case?
I was the district attorney in charge of the case. I had been in office for about 2 years as a district attorney when we got this case in our office. So I decided to lead the prosecution because of the high-profile nature of the case. This is probably the most highly publicized case ever in the state of Texas. I don't think there's any other criminal case that has seen the publicity or the public nature of a case like this one. It's known all over the world. I've been interviewed by people from all over, and not just here in the United States, from Europe, from Japan, from all over South America and Mexico, of course. So I was the district attorney back then, and when I first got the case, I didn't know exactly what we had gotten. I didn't know what was in store for us because we had never seen anything like this. And I learned quickly, the first weekend, the amount of interest there was in the case, and it was something that we would have to deal with both inside the courtroom and outside the courtroom.
What was the sentence that was given? This was back in 1995,
1995,
right?
It'll be 30 years next year. The sentence was life in prison. And back then, life in prison in a first-degree felony, which is what this was, meant that a person who's convicted and sentenced to life has to serve 30 calendar years before they're eligible to request parole. 30 calendar years in this case will end on April the 1st, on March 31st of 2025, she will have served 30 years in prison. What that means is she is eligible for parole. She can apply and try to convince the parole board to allow her freedom with some conditions. Now, doesn't mean she gets it automatically, because the sentence is life. It's life in prison. But after 30 years, they're eligible to try to convince the parole board that they're entitled to get parole.
So Yolanda Saldivar, as we understand it, is now in the parole process. As you mentioned, that comes up March of 25. Explain to me, if you can, what does it mean to be in the parole process?
Okay, what happens is several months before the eligibility date, which in this case will be March 31st of 2025. Several months before, the process begins. Most people think that there's a public hearing like a trial or something. It's not. It's a process. It's not a hearing. It's a process that starts with 3 people on the parole board who start gathering information. And they gather information from the original facts of the case, from everything that was presented at trial, to her, the way she acted, her actions while she's been detained. All this is taken into consideration and collected over a few months, and then the parole board makes a decision. Now, the public has a right to send in information if they have any. They can send it into the parole board for their consideration. The victim's family has a right to participate, and they have a right to participate either in person, by written materials, or virtually, a virtual appearance. So all these things are gathered by the parole board, by 3 members of the parole board, and then they can render a decision really at any time when they think they have enough information. They can sit down and discuss it, and then of the 3 members, it takes 2 to grant parole. And if it's granted, it could be any time before the 31st. Now, she doesn't get released until the release date, but the decision could be at any time.
So the decision could come before March if they choose to do that.
It can, and it can also come after March also if they think they need more time for deliberation.
Okay. Do they solicit things like, written statements from the victim's family, or does the victim's family and others just have to know that this is our time to do that?
They don't actually solicit things. They send out notices that it's being considered, and some notices are required to be sent out. For example, the victim's family and anybody else in the victim's who can be considered a victim or victim's family, as long as they register with the parole board, they're entitled to receive notice. And when they receive notice, they have a right to either send in whatever information they have or request an appearance before the board in person. Also, the local district attorney, the district attorney's office that was involved in the prosecution, which was my office back in 1995. Locally, the district attorney should have already received notice that the process has begun. They also have a right to submit whatever information they have, and I hope that they are in the process of collecting information and getting in touch with other people to try to get whatever is necessary to present something to the parole board so that it can be considered.
What kind of information would you look for them to be maybe putting together?
From my standpoint, I think the possibility of future dangerousness of this individual is very important. If there's any information or any type of evidence that indicates that there would be some danger to a member of the public, or more importantly, to the victim's family in this case, or to anybody else. If there's any kind of evidence like that, it should be gathered and sent in so that the board, the parole board, will have this consideration. The prison system is set up to rehabilitate people, to make sure that this person is a changed individual and will no longer pose a danger to the public or to the victim's family. So I think the important matter that needs to be addressed, and that needs to be addressed by the local DA's office, is to see if there is any indication, any evidence of a possibility of this person after being released would pose a danger to the public. That needs to be addressed or sent to the board so that they can consider it.
And the same thing is true then for the family of Yolanda Saldivar or others who would like to speak in her defense. They have that opportunity here.
Of course, everybody. In fact, the public also has an opportunity to present whatever they have. Facts. I mean, I don't think any emotional, you're angry and you don't want to release, well, that'll be considered, but I don't think they'll put a lot of weight on it. What they're looking for is any indication. What's important right now is the victim's family, what they're thinking, what they're feeling. If they fear, if there's any fear of there possibly being any danger to them, they should come forward and hopefully either themselves or through the district attorney's office or to the victim's assistance office address this and tell them, look, we're worried about this because of the circumstances of the case back then, about everything that happened and everything that's happened up to now. There have been several interviews that have been conducted with Yolanda Saldivar. I have never seen any change in her. You would think that after 30 years with these rehabilitative efforts in the judicial system and in the penal system, you would see some change, you would see some remorse, you would see some expression of sorrow. I have not seen that at all in all the interviews. There was one earlier this year, and still no expression of remorse, no expression of sorrow, or not even asking forgiveness from the family for what has happened.
She has maintained, I think all along, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the shooting was accidental. She doesn't deny the shooting, but says it was accidental. That was not the way that you saw it, though.
No. The evidence at trial disproved the theory of an accidental shooting. Mm-hmm. I think if it had been proven that it was an accident, first of all, I would not have prosecuted the case. If they convinced me that it was an accident, of course I wouldn't go forward with the case. It would be improper, it would be unethical for me to move forward. So if I had been convinced it was an accident, I wouldn't have gone forward. Secondly, you have the grand jury, 12 people on the grand jury. If there was any indication, any evidence of an accidental shooting, the grand jury would probably no bill the case. And finally, the trial jury. We had a trial that lasted for 3 weeks where all the evidence was laid out to the jury. She had every opportunity, and she had some of the best lawyers representing her. She had every opportunity to present any evidence that she had that this was an accidental shooting. And she did what she did, they did what they did, and the jury said guilty. So I think it's pretty cut and dry. This was an intentional shooting. It was not an accident.
So there's nothing that you have seen that changes your belief about what the facts of the case were then and remain to be today.
Right. I have not seen anything that changes my belief, my original belief. When I studied the evidence, I looked at it and I thought it was an intentional shooting. To this day, I have not seen anything. I have not heard anything. No evidence has been presented that'll change my mind, that makes me believe this was accidental. This was not an accidental shooting. The important part of the trial, as far as I'm concerned, from my standpoint, was the aftermath of the shooting, not the shooting itself. The shooting, there was one single witness to the shooting, and that was Yolanda Saldivar. But after the shooting, we had several excellent witnesses who testified to what Yolanda Saldivar did right after the shooting, and that is going outside the hotel room and pointing the gun at Selena, and like she was going to shoot her again. And that by itself, to me, indicates this was not an accident. She was intentionally trying to kill her, and she did.
Your opinion here, and I understand it is that, should Yolanda Saldivar be given parole in March when she's eligible?
Based on what I have seen up to now, everything that I've seen, taking all that into consideration, if the parole board does what they do and they do it properly and they base it on the evidence, I don't think they should grant parole at all. Now, they may come up with something between now and March that I haven't seen, and if that's put in there, maybe it'll be a different consideration. But based on what I've seen so far, I think it would be a serious mistake to grant parole at this time. I think there's still some danger for the public, not necessarily for the public, but for the Quintanilla family.
Do you think there's any danger to Yolanda Saldivar should she be released? I mean, this has been, as you mentioned, such a high-profile case. A lot of people, the emotions, the feelings are still raw.
It's so amazing to me. When I was trying this case 30 years ago, I looked around and saw thousands of people all interested in this case. And to myself, I thought to myself, all this is going to be gone. In 5 years, people are going to forget about this trial. People are going to forget about Selena. People are going to forget this ever happened. And I was so wrong. 30 years later, there is so much interest in the case. And I really believe that the safest place for Yolanda would probably be where she is. She's been there safely for 30 years. Lord knows what will happen if she's released. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Good information. Anything else you would add about any of this on this topic?
If people are really interested, they should probably contact the Board of Pardons and Paroles on their website. And there's something in there, I know that there's got to be for public input. If you really want to have some input, that's the way to go, is look at that, look for the public input section of the website, and go in there and tell them what it is that you want to tell them.